I'm here to talk about Guinea worm. What you see here is a Guinea worm case. Its manifestation is one or more worms coming out of a person's body, any part of the body. Without any medical care, it'll take 9 to 11 weeks for this worm to emerge. During that time, the person will have debilitating pain and an open wound. And as you see here, they're subject to secondary infections. His story started 12 months earlier when he innocently entered a water source contaminated with Guinea worm and took a drink of water. He didn't know he was infected until the worm started to come out. Now, this is a disease that affects rural communities. It affects farmers, and the Carter Center has been trying to eradicate this disease since 1986. When it is eradicated, it'll be the first parasitic disease to be eradicated. It'll also be the first disease eradicated primarily through behavior change, because there is no cure for this disease, there's no vaccine, there's no drug. I was asked to discuss Nigeria and Sudan. In 1988, the Carter Center started working with the Federal Ministry of Health to establish their Guinea worm eradication program. We discovered the country had over 653,000 cases of Guinea worm throughout the entire country. This meant that Nigeria was the most highly endemic country in the world and had the most intense transmission in the world, and the gap between Nigeria and all the other countries was very, very wide. As you can see, over about 20 years, we finally succeeded in breaking transmission. The keys to success in Nigeria were several. First of all, we had community recruitment of village volunteers. Secondly, we had intense supervision to make sure that surveillance and the interventions were in place and working properly. Third, we had very intense data collection. We collected both surveillance data and the status of the interventions through performance indicators every month. And when I say every month, by the 10th of each month, we had all the data from all the endemic and at-risk villages from the previous month. So it was very demanding, and we relied on those data to manage the programs, identify problems and respond to them, as well as to assess supervision. Also, you will see on this, in the 1990s, the cases started to stagnate. So we had to sort of change things a little bit. And we introduced a new intervention called case containment, which was a more rigorous intervention. And by that, it meant that within 24 hours of a worm emerging, the person had to have the wound bandaged, the community warned, the water source treated, and the supervisor informed so that they could come visit and confirm everything was done properly. So in 1995, President Carter, the former US President Jimmy Carter, against great odds, successfully brokered a Guinea worm ceasefire in Sudan. That allowed the Carter Center to take the implementation package that had been developed in Nigeria and implement it in Sudan. Now, when I say Sudan, at that time I'm talking about the entire country. However, we were most successful in the northern areas of Sudan because that's where there was peace. In southern Sudan, we were able to implement some interventions episodically, but because of insecurity, we could not maintain a presence there. And we acted as a liaison between if you will, the Federal Ministry of Health and the warring parties in South Sudan to help coordinate health services. But as you can see, by using the strategy in Nigeria and applying in Sudan, within 8 years, northern Sudan was free of the disease. But we still had South Sudan. So in 2005, there was a comprehensive peace agreement that brought a ceasefire between Sudan and South Sudan. And that allowed the Carter Center to go into South Sudan, establish a permanent presence, and help the South Sudan Ministry of Health. However, there were still some challenges, 2 in particular. One was insecurity. Even though the civil war the fighting may have stopped, there was still fighting in South Sudan, primarily from 2 sources. First is you had inter and intra-communal violence around cattle. And usually it's seasonal. It would happen during the dry season, but you never knew exactly which communities would erupt. And the analogy I use is it's like boiling water. You see the bubbles come up, they're almost random, and you didn't know exactly where they would come up. So by relying upon community, village volunteers, who we established a close relationship with, as well as the communities, they oftentimes provided us with intelligence and would warn us, it might be a good time to leave. And then something would happen, but our staff were safe. The other problem we had in South Sudan, we saw it periodically in other countries, but not on the scale that we saw it in South Sudan, is the people in South Sudan are constantly on the move. And particularly in the east of the Nile area, you would have a village, and the inhabitants during the day may be gone, and that if you didn't know where they were, you would have to go to 5 or 6 different locations. They would have milking places where they would milk cows. They would have gardens where they would grow crops. They would have places where they go fishing, etc. And so a challenge that we had was how to establish some sort of surveillance system that would monitor these movements. And that was a huge scale. Just to give you an example how quickly we ramped up in South Sudan, we went in 2006. By the end of 2007, we had active surveillance in 22,500 villages. Now, as you can see, in 2017, we did reach 0 cases. However, we were skeptical about that number because there were still areas in which insecurity precluded us from getting in on a sustained basis to conduct surveillance so that we had some confidence that we knew whether there were cases of Guinea worm in South Sudan or not. And as happened in 2018, there were 10 cases. Every one of those came from an area that was formerly insecure, that we were worried about, and we were ready to respond. So far, in 2019, there have been 0 cases in South Sudan, but there is 1 suspect case that's under investigation. So if I could summarize, sort of 4 operating principles of the Guinea Worm Eradication Program that we apply to all of the programs, even though they may be adjusted depending upon the local context. First of all, we implement through the government infrastructure if at all possible. Reason for that is we want to leave something that's sustainable. We want people, to learn by doing and then be able to apply those lessons elsewhere. Secondly, as I mentioned, we deliver services at the village level through community-recruited village volunteers. Then we're data-driven. As I said, we collect monthly data, surveillance data, as well as performance indicator data, and we use that to monitor the performance of the program, supervisors, as well as to monitor the progress of the program. And then finally, we're outcome-oriented. Yes, we have to do trainings, but we try to keep our eye on the prize, which is the eradication of Guinea worm. By doing that, what we have found is you can actually get a coalition of people. If they're invested in the vision, the other things will take care of themselves. So right now where we are is there were 21 endemic countries. 17 have broken transmission. 4 remain: Mali, Ethiopia, Chad, forget it now, and South Sudan. Mali has not reported a case in 2 years. Ethiopia has yet to report a case. As I said, South Sudan has not yet reported a case, even though there's a suspect case. Chad is now our greatest challenge, and interestingly, is primarily in dogs. But if we're lucky, we hope to eradicate Guinea worm in the near future, and thank you very much.